In modern warfare, has propaganda itself become an end result?
Well, I mean, this has been this way for some time. If we go back to the First World War, one of the main reasons why the United States ended up fighting on the side of Great Britain against Germany was because of the effectiveness of the propaganda that was used to demonize the German Empire and the Kaiser. But it was a righteous cause. I mean, at the end of the day, we did the right thing in defeating Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. Today, of course, information warfare, propaganda, whatever we want to call it, it is an essential part of how we wage war today, motivating the nation to support conflicts which may not be supportable if it weren't for the propaganda. This is no longer about good versus evil. This is about implementing policies so I think the difference is today that the propaganda is being used for nefarious purposes to deceive the American public about the reality of the policies that they're being asked of.
Welcome back. Today we explore Ukraine's disastrous offensive in Kursk. Inspector Scott Ritter and Colonel Douglas McGregor have warned that Ukraine's reckless push into Russian territory is leading to devastating losses. Just yesterday, Zelensky's forces shattered records not in victories, but in daily casualties. This isn't just about one battle, it's a larger proxy war between East and West, with Russia playing the long game, capitalizing on Ukraine's mistakes. Let's dive into the details and uncover how this conflict is unfolding. Inspector Scott Ritter has repeatedly pointed out that Ukraine's strategy in Kursk was flawed from the outset, and yesterday's events only served to prove him right. The battlefield in Kursk is quickly becoming a graveyard for Ukraine's forces. Yesterday, the numbers reached a staggering new high, with over 2,425 Ukrainian soldiers lost in a single day across various fronts. Let that sink in. This is a record-breaking figure, surpassing the previous high set just a few days earlier of 2,355 soldiers. Colonel Douglas McGregor has pointed out time and again that these losses are unsustainable for Ukraine. In Sumy Kursk alone, 300 soldiers were killed, along with 20 armored vehicles, 3 tanks, and a significant amount of artillery. But the carnage didn't stop there. The losses continued across Ukraine's other battlefronts. In Kharkiv, they suffered the loss of 80 soldiers, a lower number compared to previous days, but still significant. In Kupiansk, the death toll reached 440, adding to the ever-growing list of casualties. But Bakhmut stands out, a hotspot where Ukraine's forces have been bleeding out for weeks. Yesterday alone saw 765 soldiers fall, an incredible number that nearly broke their previous record of 800 soldiers in a single day. The relentless battle here is driving Ukraine to the brink of collapse. Let's not forget Avdiivka. This front has been particularly cruel to Ukraine's inexperienced conscripts, with 640 soldiers lost in just 24 hours. These soldiers are facing hardened Russian forces that have been fighting in Donetsk for years. The stark contrast in experience shows clearly on the battlefield, where Ukrainian troops are often left cowering behind makeshift defenses, only to be overwhelmed by Russia's relentless bombardments and superior tactics. Avdiivka, a front that once seemed less significant, is now another graveyard in this war of attrition. Overall, Ukraine has suffered a cumulative death toll that is unprecedented in modern warfare. The heavy losses in Bakhmut and Avdiivka alone accounted for nearly 1,400 soldiers, more than half of yesterday's total. The Ukrainian military leadership appears increasingly detached from the reality on the ground, pushing their soldiers into battles they cannot hope to win, all while Zelensky dreams of holding Kursk. But as Colonel McGregor has said repeatedly, a nation cannot fight indefinitely with this level of loss. Sooner or later, something will give, and it seems that moment is rapidly approaching. With these staggering losses in mind, let's turn our attention to the equipment and machinery that Ukraine is losing at an alarming rate. The Kursk region has become a veritable swamp for Ukrainian armor and vehicles. Inspector Scott Ritter has noted that without armored support, Ukraine's forces are left vulnerable, and nowhere is this clearer than in Kursk. Out of the 24 vehicles lost yesterday, 20 were destroyed in the Kursk offensive alone, an astonishing 83% of all vehicle losses for the day. Let's talk specifics. Ukraine's armored divisions are being decimated by Russia's well-prepared defenses. In Kursk, 3 tanks were obliterated, making up 100% of yesterday's tank losses. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. This represents the total collapse of entire armored battalions. Why does this matter? Tanks are the spearhead of any offensive campaign. Without them, Ukrainian forces are left vulnerable, particularly in open battlefields like Kursk, where Russian artillery and anti-tank weapons are systematically picking off Ukrainian forces. Colonel Douglas Macgregor has consistently emphasized the importance of maintaining armored support in these kinds of engagements. Without it, Ukraine's ground forces are essentially walking into a meat grinder. But it's not just tanks and armored vehicles. Ukraine's air power is also dwindling at an alarming rate. Yesterday saw the loss of a Su-27 fighter jet and a MiG-29, both crucial assets in Ukraine's dwindling air force. This brings the weekly toll to 5 aircraft, including 2 helicopters. And while the air war may not make as many headlines as the ground battles, it is equally devastating. Losing control of the skies over Kursk means that Ukrainian ground troops are left exposed to Russia's relentless airstrikes and artillery barrages. Colonel Macgregor has stressed time and again that air superiority is essential for any successful military campaign. Yet, Ukraine is losing that battle too, and with each passing day, the skies become more dangerous for Ukrainian pilots. On top of these losses, Ukraine's attempts to use drones for reconnaissance and strike missions are also failing. A total of 91 UAVs were destroyed, with 53 of them taken out while attempting to penetrate deep into Russian territory. These drones are vital for Ukraine's efforts to gather intelligence and carry out precision strikes, but the Russian air defense systems are proving to be too strong. Ukraine is throwing everything it has at Kursk, but the returns are devastatingly poor, and the equipment losses are unsustainable. As the equipment and manpower losses pile up, we must consider the bigger strategic picture. What is Ukraine trying to achieve, and why are they failing? Ukraine's campaign in Kursk is not just a failure, it's a strategic disaster. Colonel Douglas Macgregor and other military experts, including Inspector Scott Ritter, have long warned that Ukraine's objectives in Kursk were overly ambitious, bordering on reckless. The original plan, as revealed by President Putin, was to seize Kursk's nuclear power plant within 7 days. Now, more than 15 days into the campaign, that goal seems laughable. Let's break this down. Ukraine has spread its forces too thin, attacking not only in Kursk but also launching assaults on Bryansk and Belgorod. These attacks are meant to distract and divide Russian forces, but instead they've stretched Ukraine's own resources beyond their limits. The Ukrainian high command seems to be under the illusion that these hit-and-run tactics will destabilize Russia's defenses. But as Colonel Macgregor often points out, this type of strategy only works when you have the strength to follow through, and Ukraine simply doesn't. What's worse, even if Ukraine somehow manages to seize more territory in Kursk, they won't be able to hold it. Kursk is not a city that can be easily taken or controlled. It's a region deeply entrenched in Russian culture, with strong local resistance to Ukrainian occupation. And as we've seen in other regions, such as Kherson, Ukraine's attempts to impose its will on occupied territories often result in disaster. The people of Kursk will not submit easily, if at all. Ukraine is setting itself up for a long and bloody occupation that it cannot sustain. Strategically, this campaign is falling apart. Yesterday's losses in Kursk, Bryansk, and Belgorod highlight Ukraine's inability to maintain the momentum needed for a sustained offensive. Russia, meanwhile, is playing the long game. They are absorbing Ukraine's attacks, allowing them to exhaust themselves while Russia prepares for the inevitable counteroffensive. Colonel Macgregor has often stressed the importance of letting your enemy weaken themselves before launching your own decisive strike. And right now, that's exactly what Russia is doing. With Ukraine's strategic blunders mounting, let's shift our focus to the local impact, the human toll on Kursk's population, and the absurdity of Ukraine's re-education plans. Zelensky's latest illusion, his plan to re-educate the people of Kursk, is nothing short of absurd. Even as Ukraine struggles to maintain any meaningful hold on the region, they're already talking about indoctrinating its population. Let's be clear, Kursk is deeply Russian, both culturally and historically. The Orthodox faith runs strong here, and Ukraine's attempts to impose their will are met with fierce resistance. We've seen the results of these failed re-education campaigns before. In Kherson, Ukraine attempted to impose its ideology, only to find that the local population rejected it outright. Kursk will be no different. Colonel Macgregor has always said that cultural dominance cannot be forced through military means. It requires a deep and lasting connection with the people. Ukraine lacks this connection, and it's becoming increasingly obvious that their plans in Kursk are destined to fail. Kursk is not just a battleground, it is a cultural fortress for Russia. The people of Kursk are tied deeply to Russian traditions, faith, and identity. The idea that Ukraine could simply march in, take control, and then re-educate the population is not only naive, it's dangerous. This isn't just about winning hearts and minds, this is about forcing an entire population to abandon its roots, its beliefs, and its connection to the Russian state. And as history has shown time and time again, these types of social engineering projects fail spectacularly. Colonel McGregor has consistently warned that Ukraine is not prepared for the long-term consequences of such a policy. The military campaign is already faltering, and Ukraine is in no position to deal with the backlash of trying to impose its ideology on a resistant population. The focus should be on securing tangible military objectives, not on fantasy political projects that have no basis in reality. As Ukraine's ambitions falter, let's look at how Russia's strategy is methodically dismantling their offensive capabilities. Inspector Scott Ritter has long emphasized that Russia's strategy in this war is one of patience and attrition, not flashy victories. And we see that strategy playing out perfectly in Kursk. Russia is allowing Ukraine to throw wave after wave of attacks, only to wear them down bit by bit. It's not just about holding the line, it's about methodically dismantling Ukraine's offensive power. Yesterday alone, Russian forces repelled multiple Ukrainian assaults and struck back with devastating precision. In Avdiivka, they destroyed Ukrainian positions, while in Kursk, they systematically eliminated Ukrainian vehicles and aircraft. This is not just a defensive war for Russia, it's a war of exhaustion. And with every failed Ukrainian assault, Russia inches closer to total victory. The key to Russia's success is its ability to absorb Ukraine's attacks without overextending itself. Colonel McGregor has repeatedly highlighted the importance of maintaining strong defensive positions while waiting for the right moment to strike. Russia's ability to sustain this strategy, even in the face of heavy fighting, speaks to their superior military organization and planning. They are not rushing into costly offensives, but instead waiting for Ukraine to exhaust itself. This strategy is paying off. Ukraine is running out of time, resources, and options. Their ability to maintain a sustained offensive is collapsing, and Russia is poised to take full advantage of this. In Kursk, we see the future of this war that will be won not by bold moves or dramatic battles, but by patience, strategy, and the steady erosion of the enemy's will to fight. With Ukraine's forces collapsing, it's only a matter of time before the tide fully turns in Russia's favor. Let's wrap up with what the future holds for this conflict. As Colonel Douglas McGregor and Inspector Scott Ritter have consistently argued, the Kursk campaign has exposed Ukraine's strategic flaws and reckless overreach. What began as an ambitious offensive has devolved into a tragic quagmire of record-breaking casualties and shattered ambitions. Zelensky's vision of a re-educated Kursk now seems like little more than a fantasy. Meanwhile, Russia's patience and strategic planning are paying off, with every failed Ukrainian assault bringing them closer to victory. The real question now is how much longer can Ukraine sustain these devastating losses? At this rate, it seems their ability to fight back is diminishing by the day. For Russia, it's not just about winning Kursk, it's about outlasting Ukraine in this war of attrition. Time, after all, is on Russia's side. Let's be clear, viewers, what we are witnessing in Kursk is a turning point in this war. Ukraine's strategy is falling apart at the seams, and Russia's steady, methodical approach is proving to be more effective with each passing day. As the war continues, it's becoming increasingly obvious that Ukraine cannot sustain this level of loss for much longer. Colonel McGregor and Inspector Ritter's warnings are proving to be prophetic. This is a war that will be won not by sheer force, but by the careful, patient application of strategy.